Well, I wanted to do another reverse decoupage plate tutorial. This one will be very different from the one I did almost a year ago for Easter. These 4 little dessert plates are the only ones that I am doing because I think they will look really good on just basic white plates, basic white dinner plates or chargers. So the first step is always to clean them well, and then we want to ensure that the back is totally clean and grease-free. So alcohol is the way to do that. I'm not going to worry about the front side because my fingerprints will end up being all over it. All right, my plate is clean with alcohol. And my goal here is to do a checkerboard pattern on the outer rim and then have my decoupage paper in the middle. When you're doing any kind of striping, you need a quality tape. I want my stripes 1/2 inch thick, so it's helpful if you have 1/2 inch tape. In addition to that, you need a tape that's going to prevent any kind of bleeding of the paint underneath, seeping underneath. Having said that, I'm still going to have to pull the tape right after I finish painting because it more than likely will dry to the edge of the tape and pull it up. So this is the tape that I'm using. It is a 3M vinyl tape. I purchased it from Amazon. It's the 1/2 inch wide. It's actually a tape that they use in the auto industry for like pinstriping, so that will work for a slick surface. Now I'm kind of cheating to find my middle here because I've got my cross in my parchment paper and I'm using that, and plus with the Dollar Tree plates, they have this little number stamp here. I wish they didn't, but they do. And usually it's located in the middle. So I am going to stick my piece of tape in the middle here, but I will double check and see if we've got even amount on both sides. So it's from the rim, it's basically 2 1/8 there and 2. So I'm a little off. So this piece of tape I'm putting down first is actually my marker piece. You'll see what I mean, I think, in a second. Where this tape is actually where paint is going to go because I want a colored paint in the center of the plate. But to make it easy to space every 1/2 inch, I'm using this as my marker. Then I can place tape on either side of it. Like so. And I can lift that one off. And keep working. Let's talk a second about the paint that I'm going to be using while I'm doing this. The last set of dinnerware plates I did last year at Easter were a completely different style. And I used a few acrylic paints, but mostly chalk paint. And that worked beautifully, but I know that after I paint this, I'm going to have to bake it, to bake that paint onto the glass before I tape it the opposite direction. So with that in mind, I have to get a paint that is for glass that you can bake to cure it. And I have that. Folk Art makes one, an enamel, gloss acrylic enamel paint for glass that you can bake. An hour after you paint it, you can bake it. So if you do something like this, I would recommend getting the paint for glass. Okay, that looks pretty good. Looks like I got about the same margin on both ends here. And right here, it's very close to the same margin. So now I want to just burnish it down very well. I'm leaving the tails on the ends because that's going to help me pull the tape easily. Now, little air bubble there. All right, everything's burnished down. This is the size of my circle. So I want to protect this area and remind myself not to paint there. Also, because I'm not going to put any kind of a colored rim around here, I need this paint to go right up to my rice paper, my decoupage paper. So I'm just going to kind of hold it here. This is the paint, as I mentioned. Anytime painting on glass, I like to use a sponge brush. And I buy them in bulk because they do not last forever. This is a big kind of pack. I hardly have any of them left. This was a big pack of them. I bought these on Amazon, so if you're interested in those, I'll link them in the description box. They're good little sponge brushes. So I'm going to load my sponge, offload it a little bit. I don't want this to be super, super solid. I want it to look a little bit airy, so that when the final color paint goes on after the blue in the opposite squares, a little bit of it will pick up behind the blue and it'll be softer looking if it's not just super, super solid. So I've offloaded a little bit. Now I'm just gently pouncing up and down. You don't want to swoosh it or you'll get lines, but you can fix your lines if you do that just by repouncing. Get all the way to the edge. When I first load my brush, my sponge brush, I don't pounce as hard in case I've got a lot of paint on there. So I'm just kind of tickling the surface until I see, okay, I've got this amount of paint, I can press a little harder. Watch your hands. Keep your fingertips clean, or you'll transfer paint where you don't want it. Okay. Now I'm going to let these dry for an hour, all 4 of them. Got one more to do. And then I will bake it. The baking directions are: bake, air dry for 1 hour, place in a cool oven, heat your oven to 350 degrees and bake for 30 minutes. Cool in the oven and then remove. Now the way this is stated, place in cool oven, heat to 350, bake for 30 minutes. What it doesn't say is when to start your timer. Do you start it when you put it in the oven, or do you start it when it's at 350? I will Google that while these are drying for an hour and get back to you on that one. The answer to my own how to bake question is that it needs to bake for 30 minutes at 350 degrees. So on my oven, it's nice because once it reaches whatever temp I've set it on, it'll give me a little beep. So that's what I listened for while I was doing other things in the house. And once it reached temp, then I set my timer for 30 minutes. After that, turned the oven off and let it the dishes completely cool in the oven, which actually took several hours for it to cool down to room temperature again. At this point, I have retaped going the opposite direction to create the plaid design. The most important taping part of this is the very first piece. You need to make sure that you are exactly at 90-degree angles centered with that first piece. And then of course you just follow the same steps. Now at this point I did not bake it. I completely just let it dry for an hour. And at this point I am just tidying up some areas where there was just a tiny bit of spillage under the tape. For these dessert plates, I chose the Sweet Images Beatrix Potter Peter Rabbit from Etsy and paid for the download. Now, if you would like to have me show you exactly how I do this in Cricut, let me know in the description box. Make a comment about it that you'd like to see exactly how I resize these photos. I mean, it's a pretty basic thing. If you have a Cricut, you probably already know how to do this, but it did take me a little time to figure out exactly how to make it look the best and get my sizing correct and slice it. These images were not circles. If they had been circles, that would have been a lot easier. They were rectangles. So there was a little bit of a trick to sizing it. I always print on the laser paper that I purchased from Amazon. The link will be in the description box below. But I don't think I've ever mentioned before about this rice paper for a laser printer. It has a smooth and a rougher side to it. I do not print on the smooth side. I get a better inked image if I print on the side that's a little bit more textured. You're working a little bit blindly when you're doing a reverse decoupage because you cannot see the image. So you saw me folding the paper in half there so that I knew exactly where center was on the actual printed image. Then I turned it over to look to see if it looked right. And now I've lined up my plate. The little number is at the bottom of the plate, so I know I'm at the bottom. And now I'm just applying Mod Podge. Now I am using just the Mod Podge that I have, which is matte. You could use gloss, or you could purchase dishwasher safe. Honestly, even though I'm using paint that's supposed to be safe for the top drawer of the dishwasher, I'm not going to recommend that. I just think these things are delicate, and even using the products that are supposed to make them more user-friendly in terms of cleaning, I just think it'd be better to hand wash. You're not, these are specialty plates. You're not going to be using them as everyday plates. So the way I do it, as you saw, is I applied just a little bit of Mod Podge on the top part, put my paper down, flipped it back over to check to make sure it looked centered, especially because I wanted blue line that I had first painted right dead center, both directions in the image. And then you just work a little bit along. You don't want to have a lot of gloppy decoupage glue, the Mod Podge. You want it to be as smooth as you can get it, but you don't want it too thin either. So I just continue. At this point I can go ahead and do the rest of the little plate. It's not that large. And in order to press it down and make sure I don't have any bubbles, I usually use saran wrap, but I didn't have any. So, at least I didn't have it in the basement. Didn't want to go back upstairs to get it, but I had a Ziploc bag. And to tell you the truth, sticking my hand in the Ziploc bag was actually, I thought, more effective in smoothing out the paper than actually using the balled up saran wrap. After applying that, I put another coat of Mod Podge, let it dry, and I ended up applying 2 more coats before my final paint goes on. Using the sponge brush does end up giving you a little bit of texture on the plate. And before I do the second coat, I'm going to sand it ever so slightly. And also on these edges, they don't look clean. So I'm going to sand off that edge too. These little sanding pads are really handy. All right, for my second coat, I am going to use a brush because I don't really want to build up any more texture. And it may be that I have to do a third coat because remember, I'm covering up that French blue with warm white. Because I have the texture on there already any brush strokes are not going to show, especially if I do a good job of smoothing them out. Okay, before it dries, I'm going to take a baby wipe and run my finger along the edge. I'm not sure anybody ever thinks about doing anything to the back side of a plate. I guess it might be useless because you really don't see it, but then again, you do see it when you're picking it up, moving it around, and etc. So I decided to add some interest using Iron Orchid Designs Bella Stamp. I am going to add some of that French blue color on the back of the plate. I'm sizing it here, seeing how well it's going to fit right in the center. Normally I would put both pieces on the thin mount, but it was so tight there, and there was a little tiny gap in the top one. I'll show you a closer up. Well, I think I'm showing it kind of there, that I needed to be able to overlap it a little bit, so I will have to stamp them separately. To control the amount of paint that I have on the stamp, I am again going to use a sponge brush. Don't want just a ton of paint on there. Now, when you place your stamp, once you commit, you've committed. So do your due diligence in placing it exactly where you want it. To do this, you want to hold the stamp with one hand and rub with the other. You can see me going back and forth and checking it to see what imprint is left. When you're through, lift it straight up so that you don't smear it. After this coat dries for a good hour or more, I will go ahead and give a couple of coats of dead flat. I like to use Polyvine varnish. It's a water-based product, even though it's called varnish. But that will just help give some extra safety to the painted back, even though it is enamel paint for glass. As always, thanks so much for watching. Keep looking up and have a good one.